Story 1. I joined a multi-level marketing company in 2016. I thought I was going to earn that Mercedes and help my husband retire early. What a joke that was. I ended up spending way more on products so I could have a testimony to share than I ever made with my small commission. I am embarrassed to admit I was one of those people saying, "Hey girl, haven't seen you since high school. Can I help you change your life?" Story 2. I paid $300 in 1985 to get assistance renting my first apartment. They provided no help at all and just gave me a photocopy of a newspaper clipping with apartment to let ads. I found one on my own 2 weeks later. Rent was $495 per month, and it really hurt not having that $300. Story 3. 6 months after graduating from my rural Kansas high school, I joined the United States Army and was told I would see the world. I was stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Story 4. A player named Nadnar became my girlfriend on RuneScape. After about 1 or 2 weeks, she asked to borrow some of my more expensive gear. After giving it to her, she said, "Read my name backwards," then promptly logged out and blocked me. Story 5. The $5 I gave a man on the Rock Creek Bridge in Georgetown was not actually collected for a soccer team to get new uniforms. Story 6. In my early 20s, I needed a job badly. I got hired by a company that was just a multi-level marketing scam. You did get paid every week, but if you failed to reach a certain sales target, you fell into the hole, which meant you owed them money. Story 7. I clicked one of those shady pay now links and my entire account got drained. I was able to take swift action and the bank reversed it since I did not have instant transfers enabled. Those were the most stressful 5 minutes of my life because I was in the middle of buying my current apartment. I was tired, and they got me at the right moment. Never again. Story 8. Being accused of copyright infringement for sharing copyrighted adult content. The lawyer never filed lawsuits but threatened hundreds of people at a time. It was easy to resolve, but most people became scared and paid to avoid further issues. The lawyer eventually had his professional license revoked. Story 9. Signed up the company I was working for to be on a pay-to-advertise list. One of my first real jobs was working as an assistant in an office. One of my daily tasks was to handle the mail as it came in. Most of it was invoices from vendors and similar items. One piece of mail was a registration page to get the company listed in the directory. Thinking this was the normal directory, I saw this as a good thing and immediately filled out the paperwork to register the company before putting the paperwork into an envelope and back into the mailbox. A few weeks later, a bill for around $500 arrived. By mail. I did not recognize the company but passed it on to the controller as I normally would. Moments later, the controller asked me a series of questions and eventually told me about these scam companies. It was my first time working in an office, so I had no idea. Thankfully, I was not authorized to sign for the company in any capacity, so after a few phone calls between the scam company and the controller, the scam company sent 1 or 2 more letters before going silent. It was not the official-looking reminders to buy safety signage or copies of the business certificate that caught me, but rather the more obvious directory scam. Story 10. About 15 years ago, my best friend and I mailed cash internationally to a man for fake identification cards. Even the UPS delivery person said, "You were sending cash?" It never occurred to us to reconsider. It turned out that the man had created several fake identification websites and multiple review websites that labeled some of his sites as fraudulent to make his other scam websites appear legitimate. Story 11. This is a long one. Too long. Didn't read. I was scammed by a friend into a pyramid scheme that was framed so perfectly. I fell for it despite usually being able to recognize them. A friend of mine, whom I trusted a lot, called me one day to ask if I had time to grab a coffee. Of course, I always have time for coffee with this friend. It was kind of our thing. What was strange this time was that he brought a binder, a notebook, and some books to give me. Felt like a job interview. He told me about a mentorship he had taken on, and knowing I have an entrepreneurial mindset, he thought I would be interested in hearing him out and possibly joining him. He said it was a small business ownership mentorship. Okay, cool. I was interested. He explained that it was a store similar to Alibaba where you work with a merchant to build your storefront. The mentorship guides you through getting your products on online or physical shelves by starting with renting space in a larger store. Most people preferred the online storefront and only brought sample products at first because it was cheaper until they had funds to expand. I was excited. This was exactly what I wanted, and I thanked him for the opportunity. He said the startup cost was $250 for a sample package that included 50 items of each basic startup product to give to others. Then it was $500 for the mentorship. It was pricey but sounded worth it. Ha! It was Amway. Story 12. While visiting New York City in our late teens, my friend and I were approached by a man who said he could get us fake identification cards. They were $25 each. However, he said that before we could enter his apartment building, we had to hand over all our $50 and $100 bills because his building was equipped with a large bill detector. We did. He ran away. I spent the rest of the day waiting for the bus home in shame and silence. Story 13. Not me, but one of the greatest things I saw happen to someone. My uncle and I were walking along Fisherman's Wharf, and a man called out, "Hey big boss man, do you want those shoes shined? Completely free. You can tip if you want, but I got you." My uncle decided, why not? The man shined his shoes and asked if he wanted to hear a story. My uncle said sure. The man proceeded to tell a relatively funny story about something. When he was done, my uncle gave him $5. The man said, "No, it's $20, man, what the heck?" My uncle said, "You said the shine was free." The man replied, "Yeah, but stories are $20. I asked and you said yes." On the sign, in very small writing, it said, "Additional stories for $20. We couldn't stop laughing. We gave him $100 and left. Story 14. A family was in a car that ran out of gas on the side of the road. I offered to drive the father to the gas station, but he declined, not wanting to leave the family alone. I did not think further or become suspicious. He convinced me to give him $25. He also tricked my coworker, who met him at the same spot 1 hour later. He even gave me a business card to contact him to get my money back. Of course, he had stolen it at a hardware store. Story 15. I received a text from the United States Postal Service that a package was delayed and I needed to provide my credit card number. It made no sense and was clearly a scam. For some reason, I entered my card information. I don't know why I believed the Postal Service would need my credit card details for any reason. Maybe I was having a bad day and wasn't thinking clearly, but I still can't believe I did something so careless. Especially since this was not the first text or call of this kind I had received. I am usually very careful about these things. I guess it only takes one moment of distraction to fall for an obvious scam. Shortly after, I received a text from my bank about suspicious charges and I canceled that card immediately. At least no real harm was done, but I still cringe when I think about it. Story 16. In a mall parking lot as a teenager, a guy came up to us and said, "Hey, I have these speakers in the back of my van. I need to sell them quickly. Do you want to buy them?" They were large subwoofer and speaker combinations, about 4 feet tall, carpeted, and looked impressive. He was acting suspicious, as if they were stolen. It made you think that for $350, it was an incredible deal. My friends and I ran to the ATM, got the cash, and bought them. When we got home and took a closer look, they were knockoffs. Looking online, they were being sold for $50. Story 17. Fat burners. My young, teenage, eating disordered mind was easily caught by ads claiming to burn fat, even though I didn't have fat that needed to be burned. Thankfully, I didn't take anything for very long, and they didn't seem to have any adverse effects. However, no one knows what could have been in those tablets. I later read news articles about girls dying from pills with similar claims. Edited to add, I think this counts as a scam, but maybe not. Story 18. When I was moving from Illinois to North Carolina, I drove through Pennsylvania. I chose a toll-free route, but after a couple of months, I received an invoice for $700. I thought there was no way this was real because I did not drive on a toll road. However, the letter looked very real and even included a picture of my license plate. Anyway, I paid it and later saw an article saying it was a scam. I am usually good at discerning things like this, but everything seemed legitimate, even the website. Story 19. I bought an expensive set of Cutco knives after I purchased my first house. My sister made fun of me for falling for a multi-level marketing scheme. She sold Herbalife. At least I still use my Cutco knives daily. Story 20. There was a person on Reddit who paid $250 for a limited edition PlayStation 5 from a sketchy-looking website. They received a photo of one printed on paper. It still blows my mind that they did not realize it was a scam until the package arrived flat. Story 21. I remember many years ago giving a friend my RuneScape password so he could kill a boss for me. Then I watched as he changed my password and looted everything, which was admittedly not very much, from the account before I could get it back. It was a tough lesson when I saw my rune plate, Dragon Med helm, and Abyssal Whip being drop traded to my friend's account. Story 22. Paying thousands of dollars for paperweights that were required for classes, which became worthless after the class because the next edition added a semicolon on page 231. Story 23. 3 Card Monty. 1980. Times Square. I am 17 years old. $20, about $78 today. They got me with the old bent corner trick. Story 24. I sold a PlayStation in the late 1990s to a man who paid with a check. I was a teenager at the time and wanted to raise money for some music equipment. I smiled and waved him off as he left, then later discovered that the check was from a stolen checkbook. I'm not sure which hurt more, knowing this man had been in my house and I had happily handed over the console, or being out of pocket by what was a large amount of money for me at the time. I also had my good nature and naivety exploited a few times on a small scale when I was very young. A homeless man was begging in Leicester Square in London and asked me for cash. I told him I could get him £5 from a nearby ATM. He followed me to the machine, which only dispensed £20 notes. He said he could give me change, so I handed him a £20 note. He then strolled off, and when I followed him, he led me on a wild goose chase through progressively smaller back alleys until I lost him. Thinking about it now, it was probably foolish to follow him alone into hidden back alleys. Once, a man in a city center asked if I could spare some change for bus fare. He was not homeless, just a polite, smiley man. I gave him £5, and he instantly changed his demeanor. He switched to a blank, expressionless stare, turned, and walked away. I followed him a few meters and tried to speak to him, but he looked at me like he was the Terminator and kept walking. Sadly, people can't always be trusted, and I learned that lesson the hard way. I had a strange experience on the other side of a scam. In 2000, I moved to London and took any job I could to support myself. One job was with a firm that provided an orientation explaining they were one of the biggest energy companies in the world. They sold power to the people who sold it to consumers. They really hyped it up. The role was telephone-based marketing and sales, which I assumed meant a call center. On my first day, I was taken to a practically vacant office with a round table, desktop telephones, and directories like the Yellow Pages. The office seemed set up so they could leave at any moment without leaving evidence of their presence. Nothing was permanent or fixed. There was no signage, and most furniture looked like it had been there from before. The job was to randomly pick businesses from the directories and cold call them to persuade them to switch providers. The whole thing felt suspicious, and I only lasted 2 or 3 days. They never paid me for that time, but I moved on. The firm was Enron, and within a year the company collapsed amid a massive accounting fraud scandal, leading to prison sentences for several senior executives. Story 25. I do not know that I ever really fell for them, but I went to and got excited about way too many job interviews that ended up being multi-level marketing. Story 26. A 15-year-old kid was selling chocolate bars as a band fundraiser. A grown adult bought 5 bars and handed me a folded $10 bill. It turned out the bill was ripped in half and useless. The person had also torn off the corners of $10 bills and taped them over the $1 bill corners. What kind of person does that? Story 27. My first job out of college was selling Verizon services door to door. It was 100% commission-based, and I was sent to low-income neighborhoods throughout my city. Needless to say, the majority of low-income people cannot afford Verizon services, whether they know it or not. It took me a week to make my first sale, But when the customers failed a credit check, I decided to quit. Never again. Story 28. Not me, but my dad. In the early 2000s, we got our first family personal computer. Dad discovered eBay and thought he was getting a new phone for £25 that should be worth £80. He didn't read the description properly and paid £25 for the cardboard box the phone came in. Story 29. I scammed myself thinking I was good enough to play tournament golf. Between the lessons, equipment, and greens fees, I am negative $100,000 easily. Story 30. Not me, but one time a friend called me frantically saying, "Dude, you have to come over right now." I was confused, but it was our regular hangout spot, so whatever. I got there, and he threw a literal 1-pound pressed brick of oregano on the table, saying, "Smoke a bowl of that and see what an idiot I am." This was the early 2000s before all of the legality, so it was a pricey and risky move to try to buy that amount. He felt like a fool. We had a good laugh, and I busted out some of my real cannabis. I think that brick of oregano sat around in his house like a trophy to his idiocy for years after. Story 31. When I got my first apartment, I received a piece of mail from a car dealership that said if I came in, I would win a prize. I fell for it, got in my car, and drove to the dealership. They told me to wait, and then a salesman started showing me cars. By the second car, it fully sank in that I had been tricked. Told them I didn't want to buy a car and insisted on the prize they advertised. The salesman was a little annoyed but went to his office and came back with a cheap coin that had the dealership logo on it. The worst part was I had told people about winning a prize, so I had to go back to work and tell everyone I got scammed. Story 32. I once received a Venmo request from a friend for $100 for groceries because she left her credit card at home and would pay me back. Without thinking, I sent the money immediately. I did not consider texting her or how a request for money through Venmo because of a forgotten credit card did not make sense. The scammer had cloned her Venmo account with the same profile picture. I got my money back by filing a claim with Venmo and my bank. To this day, I do not know what went through my head. I was trying to be a good friend. I still feel foolish even years later. I usually do not fall for scams like that. Oh well. Story 33. A woman approached my car window and explained she was $5 short for a nearby hotel. Her 3 children would have to sleep outside if no one helped. I reluctantly pulled out $5. She leaned into my car, took it from my hands, said thank you excitedly, and then walked into a liquor store. I waited outside that liquor store for 20 minutes in disbelief, but she never came out, which still confuses me. Story 34. One time I bought ferrets from an online marketplace. They charged me about $300 for the ferrets plus a 3-tier cage and said they would deliver them in a few days. A few days passed, and I never heard back, so I contacted them to ask what happened. They said I should have already received the ferrets, but if I sent $200 more, they would either find out what happened or send me more ferrets without the cage. I sent the extra $200 and never heard from them again. Honestly, that all sounds obvious now, but at the time, I was pretty sure people did not scam over something as obscure as ferrets. The moral of the story is, people will scam you over literally anything. Trust no one, especially on online marketplaces. Story 35. Multi-level marketing schemes are predatory. There is a lot of information about how they target low-income mothers who feel guilty about spending time away from home to work and earn a living. Story 36. I searched for the toll-free number for Apple and found a result at the top of the first page. Took me about 15 minutes to realize I had called a scam number. Do not trust search engine results. Visit the company's official website to get their correct number. Story 37. A pyramid scheme in the 1990s called Friends Helping Friends asked participants to give $1,000 to the person at the top of the pyramid and recruit more people. Eventually, supposedly, I would be at the top. I did not fall for it, but my friends worked hard to get me to participate. Story 38. Primerica. I was a teenager in the late 1990s when information on these kinds of scams was not as widespread as it is today. Every fiber of my being screamed scam, but because a few friends told me it was legitimate and older adults said I should not pass on a great opportunity, I took the bait. It was presented to me as an information technology job, but when I attended their presentation, it was all about selling life insurance. I was assured that my position was in information technology and that I was just there with other people who were in sales. Then came the statement that I had to pay $200 for an insurance license. I was told this was to work on computers running insurance software. Again, everything screamed fake, but I figured this could be my way into information technology jobs if it was legitimate, so I paid the $200. Only a week later, I was told I needed to pay another $200 and create a list of potential contacts to call about insurance. I immediately left. Story 39. Fell for a Microsoft support cold call. Gave the person remote access, paid $250 in gift cards, and they installed real malware themselves. Still cannot believe I basically hacked myself. Story 40. I took part in an online job interview that was just a website providing questions where you filled out forms with your answers. You did not talk to an actual person. I was scammed out of over $3,000 by a tutor at a university. Thankfully, I got my money back very quickly. Story 41. Back in college, one of my friend's roommates invited me over in the evening, telling me that he wanted to discuss a work opportunity. It turned out he spent the entire evening telling me how I should join Amway Global and the endless possibilities I could have. That was an evening I will not get back. Story 42. Police pulled me over for a minor traffic violation, asked if they could search my car, and said if I refused, they would call the judge to get a warrant. They claimed if they made me do that, they would definitely find something in the car. Threats. No, you cannot search my car. No, you are not going to try to get a warrant. No, the judge will not give it to you. No, I do not have any drugs, and I do not want to stand here for 20 minutes while you, out of shape, look around my belongings, ask me unnecessary questions, and make me put everything back when you find nothing. Give me a ticket and leave. In this small college town, police did this all the time. They always referenced a time where they found guns in a car as justification, even though there are many guns in America and having them in a car in my state is not illegal. Story 43. While standing at the automated teller machine, a van pulled up and the men told me they had a bunch of acoustic research brand speakers, which at the time were very high-end, that they could not deliver and had to unload cheaply. So I spent $51,990 per speaker. Actual acoustic research speakers of that size were well over $300 each. I got them home and realized I was scammed. I had the last laugh as the speakers I already had lacked in the bass range, and the poor quality fake acoustic research speakers provided exactly the sound needed to compensate. I added them to my system and ended up with awesome sound. I still felt like an idiot for falling for that ruse. Story 44. One I fell for, or at least I think it was a scam, involved an e-commerce course that promised making six figures easily with Shopify dropshipping. Cost me $2,000, and I did not even break even in several years. They were scam artists. Thank God I did not fall for others, but I got very close. The first one was a way too good to be true apartment listing. The price for the area was too low, the place was too nice, and the person was overly eager, claiming to be out of the country for 6 years. I asked some questions, and the response was a long email that answered none of my questions. He even sent a passport photo, which made me suspicious. I searched his email and found someone who had almost been scammed with a similar story. I blocked and reported him. The second one was a call from someone claiming to be from my electric company. They did not name the company and asked only for my first name. They said my bill was overdue. I considered giving my card number, but they claimed the amount was about $460 overdue, which surprised me. I said I would check when I got home and hung up. Later, I confirmed the bill was not overdue. Since then, I have been much more careful. I do not answer unfamiliar numbers anymore, and I will not give my card number or send money to anyone suspicious without verifying them. Story 45. Straight out of university, I fell for a multi-level marketing pyramid selling scheme. I only worked one day but still feel foolish for falling for it. Story 46. Got scammed for a used drone for my side hustle. 500 pounds gone. This happened despite taking extensive measures to protect myself, but they still got me. Thank God for the United Kingdom protections that exist. I was able to get a refund and just sacrificed and bought a new one. It hurt so much. Story 47. I was contacted by a modeling agency that seemed legitimate. They asked me to do a test shoot on Zoom wearing just my underwear. Turned out to be fake. They were secretly recording the call with other people watching and engaging in inappropriate behavior. I felt violated and foolish for falling for it. Story 48. On Facebook, a friend of my mother-in-law's made a post saying they were moving and selling some things they couldn't take with them. Camper, boat, golf cart, truck, and more. It looked like they were downsizing significantly and trying to quickly get rid of multiple items. The prices on everything were really good, probably 60% of their true value. Everything looked legitimate, and it was a personal posting by someone we knew. We saw the price on the golf carts and couldn't pass it up. We reached out, and they said they had multiple people interested and that we would need to make a deposit if we wanted it. This made sense, as the listed prices surely garnered a lot of attention. Keep in mind, we thought this was someone we knew and had no indication of anything suspicious. We sent a $1,000 deposit through Apple Cash. Then nothing. Within 5 minutes of sending the money, I started to have a bad feeling. We never heard another word from the seller after sending the money. We reached out personally through my mother-in-law to this woman, and she was overwhelmed by people saying the same thing. Turned out her Facebook account was hacked. She feels awful and had no idea anything was going on. I am a tech-savvy millennial who is usually very sensitive to scams. This was the most elaborate scam I have ever seen. The post looked legitimate, the pictures of the items looked legitimate, and the correspondence leading up to sending the money felt legitimate. I should have slowed down at sending money, but that was my mistake. There was nothing we could do. Apple Cash is basically like Western Union. That money was gone. Just an expensive lesson learned the hard way. Story 49. I went down to Camden Lock to buy some hash, and the guy said, "Here you go. Stuff it in your sock. I can see some police over there." I got back on the train, retrieved it from my sock, and unwrapped it. It was a block of MDF. I think they heard me yelling, F******, back at the station. Story 50. I did not fall for it, but one of the best coworkers I ever had, with whom I had become friendly, came back from a vacation now selling life insurance. The friendship soon thereafter fizzled out when every conversation turned into him trying to recruit me. Story 51. A man pretending to be an herbal doctor in the old market in Dubai says he has a recipe for some herbal medicine but does not have the ingredients. He sends his assistant with us for free to help purchase and mix the ingredients into the recipe. We go to different stores and buy increasingly expensive ingredients until I finally put a stop to it when the total product was worth $100, and they wanted to add another $80 worth of items. It was too late to return the ingredients, as the assistant had already mixed them together as we went along. They kept insisting that unless I completed the recipe, it would be useless. What bothered me was not knowing the full cost from the start, having no idea how much these ingredients were supposed to cost, and multiple stores working together to overcharge us. Who knows what the final cost would have been if we had not realized what was happening. Story 52. At the strip club, on the way to get a lap dance, I had to pay a $20 cover fee to the bartender. None of my friends had to pay one, who knew strippers were not trustworthy. Story 53. When I was in Australia, I attended a business sales seminar. There were sideshows and speeches with about 24 people in suits talking about how they sold to various clients. I got bad vibes and left halfway through, convinced it was a predatory multi-level marketing scheme. I am sharing this for context. A month later, still broke, I got a job as a door-to-door salesman selling education courses. I knew it was unethical but did it anyway, for 4 hours. The first house we visited was obviously set up to make us feel confident. I walked away at lunch. So, I did not exactly fall for it, but I wasted hours of my life on their nonsense. Story 54. I was scammed by a door-to-door salesperson who said they could save me money on my electric bill. They did for the first few months. Then they increased the price by more than 4 times when winter came, and my heating bill rose to over $500. I immediately called Baltimore Gas and Electric to start buying directly from them again. Story 55. I was young and naive on a vacation to San Francisco. Walking through the Tenderloin district, which I didn't know was as bad as it was, some man approached me. He looked normal, not disheveled or anything, so I didn't suspect he was homeless. He asked me to help him out, saying he got stranded in San Francisco due to some circumstance I don't remember. He seemed very convincing, so I gave him $20. I did not realize he was just deceiving people to get their money, and I have no idea why I gave him so much. I don't know when I finally realized what he did, but it was probably after too long. Since then, I have lived in many big cities, including San Francisco, and I am no longer easily deceived. Story 56. I ordered a ride-on car for my son from a fake website. It was out of stock for months, so I was not discerning enough. Story 57. I was trying to set up to have my passport renewed as quickly as possible. Paid $250 to a random company. Not sure, but I got weirded out by it. I ended up calling around and eventually going to a government office. The lady said, "We do all of this for you." I guess I'm one of the lucky ones because I did get a full refund and my passport in a timely manner. Story 58. I was 16. It was summer, and I was under serious pressure from my father to get a job. The only people willing to hire me turned out to be vector marketing, which is a deceptive scheme to get people to sell knives door to door for a small startup fee of $400 for the cost of the first set of knives. They claim you will make the money back. Even though I was an inexperienced 16-year-old, I knew this was a bad situation and walked out of the first group interview. I should not have even shown up in the first place. Anyone could have seen from the ad that it was a scam. Story 59. I almost joined Primerica when I was poor and desperate for a job after university. I went to an interview with an assistant, followed by a seminar with the local leader. Then they wanted around $200 that I literally did not have. Story 60. Not me, but I always remember one of the guys I rented a house with years ago. He bought an enormous boxed flat-screen television from a man selling them from a van on the street, literally a few meters from our house, for $200. He couldn't believe his luck snagging such a bargain. Cue him opening the box in the living room only a few minutes later with the smile fading from his face as he sees the television screen has a big hole in it and is shattered from the impact of whatever hit it. He runs back outside to hopefully catch the man, but he is, of course, long gone. It lives in my head rent-free, the idea of some grifter parking in different areas, pulling this scam, then getting out of Dodge until he has gotten rid of all these busted televisions. Story 61. I never tell anyone about this because it is still embarrassing. When I was 23, I met a woman who was fun to be around, had many friends, traveled to amazing places, and was very wealthy. After knowing her for a few months, I found out she was making $27,000 a month. Then, she told me how and that I could make that much as well if I had determination. Can anyone guess what she did for a living? I will give you a moment to guess. She was a Mary Kay sales representative. She had the pink car and everything. She talked me into buying a $2,500 starter kit. For months, I went with her to conferences and classes, and I truly believed I could make as much money as she did. I even bought a plane ticket and a fancy dress to go to a huge Mary Kay conference. It was not until I realized family and friends were making fun of me behind my back and that selling that product was not how you made money that I put it behind me. I went into thousands of dollars of debt and gained nothing from it. I just could not harass people and convince them to start selling it when I knew it was a scam. Story 62. Being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from the time I was involuntarily baptized at age 8 until 2 years ago at age 66. I retained an attorney to remove my membership from the organization. In reality, it is a real estate and securities hedge fund masquerading as a church to maintain tax exemption and gain unfair advantages over competing corporations. After all, it was incorporated under the business laws of Utah. Story 63. Once I got scammed by brokers and cryptocurrency traders. They made me buy cryptocurrencies, then stole my bank information and took all the money. I hope no one faces these scams. They are the worst. Now I have nothing left. I am writing my own story so no one will have to suffer like I did. Story 64. Nintendo Switch, Facebook Marketplace. About 2 years after launch, a guy in the next metro area was selling one for slightly below market price, around $250, including 2 games, making it a good deal. Since it was about a 90-minute drive, I was trying to figure out the best time to meet because it would be a half-day trip for me. He offered to ship it for about $10. Since he had good Facebook Marketplace feedback, around 4.8 stars, I figured it was fine. I paid, then he stopped responding. I have bought and sold probably 100 things on Craigslist and Facebook over the years, but I missed that his profile said he actually lived halfway across the country and only had a few friends. Story 65, bought a timeshare, first scam. Paid a company to get me out of the timeshare, second scam. They did not get me out of my timeshare. Story 66. In 1985, I was 15, and my friend and I took the subway into Manhattan to buy tickets to the World Wrestling Federation show. A scalper approached me and said he could get 2 tickets for $50 but needed to take the money to his contact to get them. Unbelievably, I handed him the money. You can guess the rest. It was the easiest $50 he ever made. 40 years later, and I am still upset. Story 67. I hate to say this, but I fell for the Mary Kay multi-level marketing. I really thought I was going to get the pink Cadillac. It took years to pay off the credit card debt I accrued from that. All the product had to be given away because I had absolutely no use for it. One of the creams that was supposed to fight wrinkles actually caused wrinkles. These things should be illegal. Story 68. How about the scam? I did not fall for that, everyone else did, but I was warned I should get on the train. College degree. I have far exceeded most of my degree-holding counterparts in earnings and career advancements through my own hard work without a degree. I still get told, it is never too late to go back to school. Story 69. Paid a hefty deposit for a house. The builder went into administration and transferred all assets into a separate company either before administrators were appointed or at their recommendation. This left all employees and customers with nothing. The administrators favored the owner, who was also the majority shareholder. All decisions made at meetings were unanimously in favor of the owner, who built himself 2 nice homes using funds funneled out of the company and then reappeared under a different trading name. Story 70. The Iraqi dinar is being revalued. I only lost the transaction difference between buying and selling back, but the person who introduced me to it lost a significant amount. I was completely unaware that the individuals behind the scam had a sophisticated network supporting their claims. Story 71. I was in Las Vegas. A man told me he had lost everything and was heading home early. He asked if I wanted his tickets to Cirque du Soleil for tomorrow. They had been complimentary for him, but he was leaving town the next morning because of his losses. I said that would be great. We went to a courtesy phone, and he called the box office and gave them my information. Then he asked for some money to get a cab to the airport. I gave him about $40. After that, I headed down the strip to pick up my free tickets to I am not a smart man. I still feel foolish every time I recall this story. Story 72. One of my first jobs involved selling a type of identification badge to construction firms. They had their finances in order and so on. After a few calls, I realized there was already an established identification badge that everyone used. I only worked there for 1 day, and a month later the company no longer existed. Story 73. I was really drunk and ordered one of those $99 mini excavators, a Kubota PC-01. I canceled the next morning when sober me realized that would not even cover shipping. Story 74. I ran into a man in the city who looked normal. He told me his car broke down and he needed $20 for a cab. He said I could give him my number and he would pay me back later. I believed him because he had a phone. I did not have cash on me, but he said, there is an ATM around the corner. I actually went with him and withdrew the cash with him right there. Could have been much worse, but he took the money and I never heard from him again. Story 75. Common scam from street performers in New Orleans. A person approaches you and says, I bet you $10 I can tell you where you got your shoes. You say, deal, go for it. They say, you got them right there on your feet. Story 76. As a new mother, I joined the gym to have some personal time and focus on getting my body back. I made a friend who was very encouraging and had experienced similar challenges. However, she was involved in a multi-level marketing business and was only interested in what I could spend on her products. She persuaded me for about 6 weeks, and when I declined, she stopped speaking to me. Story 77. I was at a rest stop sleeping. Police officers woke me up and said my car smelled like marijuana. Because of that, they had probable cause to search the car. They found cocaine. When we went before the magistrate for the probable cause hearing, one of the officers told the magistrate that he ran my tags and the owner came back as Enterprise. Basically, he was saying that because I was in a rental car, it made me suspicious, and that was the reason they searched my car. He was abruptly cut off mid-testimony by the other officer who said, "And we smelled marijuana. I went to prison and everyone said if you are black in a rental car, the police will pull you over and say your car smells like marijuana to search it. Biggest scam ever. Forget the police." Story 78. There was a Nigerian prince who was fabulously wealthy but had issues with his family banking system and needed my help. All I had to do was... Story 79. Damn near bought a Tesla because at one point I thought Elon Musk was an inspiring person. Story 80. I'm sometimes the scammer. In an online game, say something like, "Hey, if you press Alt and F4, something cool happens." Dummy has left the game. Always hilarious when someone falls for it. Story 81. I was 17 and joined a pyramid scheme, thinking it was genuine and that I would no longer be a burden on my parents. I paid the initial fees by taking a gold loan, mortgaging my mother's gold. I told my mother I would return double that money. It turned out that I became twice the burden I was before. It was the worst phase of my life. Story 82. The Secret and all the related Manifest Your Destiny content. I did not spend any money on it, but spent a lot of time and energy I wish I could get back. Story 83. I actually paid for 12 Rules for Life and thought Jordan Peterson was legitimate in his early days. I will never live down the shame. Story 84. People can clone phones and link to WhatsApp, assuming they have found the password somehow. When you contact them from an existing conversation, they can continue it while you think it is the proper contact. To you, it looks like the conversation carrying on. To them, it is just your new comment once you contact them again, so they do not know the context. I had an account that needed a yearly renewal. The WhatsApp conversation had renewed it about 5 times before, so I asked again. They said there was a special offer and sent a PayPal link to take advantage of it. I almost fell for it but realized they had not mentioned anything about the service at all. When I questioned them, it became obvious they did not know what I was referring to. I contacted the service directly on their website, and they confirmed what I suspected. It is a tricky situation if you are not completely alert that day. Story 85. I've always considered myself very good at spotting and identifying scam phone calls or emails right away. I even enjoy messing with those callers with Indian accents who claim I ordered a MacBook from Amazon and it's being shipped to a faraway address. I usually tell them, "Yes, that's my address," and they get flustered and hang up. However, one time I got a call from my bank about a fraud alert. I had just gone through another fraud alert a few days prior. They had perfect English, no accent, and knew enough about me and my account to sound incredibly convincing. It wasn't until they asked me for some information that they should already know or should never ask over the phone that my radar went up. I told them I would call them back. They immediately transferred me to a supervisor who sounded even more convincing, but their insistence on me calling them back was a red flag. I hung up and called my bank's toll-free number. Sure enough, there was no record of any fraud on my account or anyone from the bank calling me. I was very close to giving them the information they wanted. Well played. Still amazes me how good they were. Story 86. Having my poetry published in a book as a 7th grader and buying the book. Basically, I paid them to publish the poem. It was a lot like Who's Who or whatever they were called. Thankfully, I didn't fall for that one. Joining a sorority for the networking and philanthropy was the biggest waste of my time and money. Story 87. Reformer Artificial Intelligence Cryptocurrency Platform. I was lucky and did not lose much, but I know others who lost more than $100,000. Story 88. A man at a gas station told me he did not have enough gas to get home with his daughter and asked for help. He requested cash and I gave him $20. When he saw me open my wallet, he had the audacity to ask for another 20, and I gave it to him because I was tired and wanted to go home. I watched him walk into the convenience store through one door and walk out through another. I am all for helping people, but that is a dishonest way to do it. It really opened my eyes to the sob stories people use just to get some cash. I hated feeling used like that, but it is what it is. Story 89. There was a red-haired drug addict in Cape Town who was widely known as the red-haired American. Not actually American. He knocked on my car window as I was leaving work one day and asked if South Africans hated Americans. He told me a long story about being from San Diego and working at SeaWorld, which should have raised my suspicions. In the end, I lost 600 South African rand, approximately $50 at the time. It does not feel like a lot of money now, but it was around 8% of my salary then. Story 90. Respect your elders and do what they say because they know best. Adults are just older children, and most of them do not have a clear understanding of what is going on most of the time. Story 91. At 19, with more testosterone than intelligence, I fell for the big speakers from a couple of guys in a truck. For $200, they were acceptable and lasted me over a decade. However, they were not the studio monitors the sellers claimed they were. Story 92. That one time my whole life when the United States government taxed my paycheck and promised I would have Social Security when I retired. Story 93. My entire generation was told in school that you must go to college to have a good future, but we were never taught about the predatory student loans that can ruin your future. Any company that targets children in this way should be punished. Story 94. I signed up for a free trial and forgot to cancel. They slowly drained my account for months before I noticed. Story 95. I almost got involved in a multi-level marketing company because I was desperate for a job at the time. My ex thankfully received some inside information from a friend and told me not to go through with it. However, this same ex went to buy some welding equipment on an online auction site, but they requested payment via a gift card. We were not on good terms at the time, so I did not speak up even though it sounded like a scam. Of course, he ended up getting scammed. I felt bad for not warning him, and it still bothers me. Story 96. I bought speakers from some guys in fake Best Buy uniforms out of a van. I figured it was a scam but thought I was still getting speakers that worked at a decent price, $200 for a sound system from a brand I was interested in anyway. No, the speakers were fake and the receiver was missing. A cheap lesson to learn that a deal too good to be true, even when you think you see through the scam and have the upper hand, is too good to be true. I kept the speakers for years as a stern reminder not to be an idiot. It was partially effective. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.